Hello English learners, this is Learn English with Brandon. In this video I have some listening practice for you, and I'm going to talk about why the United States is the best country in the world. Now of course you're thinking, whoa, that's quite the statement, Brandon. Now I'm not here to argue that the United States is the best country in the world. There is no best country. Some countries have better things than others, but I would like to talk to you about how the United States has gotten this image more so globally over any other country in the world in the past 40 years. In the United States, we made a lot of economic progress during World War II. World War II was our opportunity to flourish as a society. Right before World War II was getting started, or before it was in its full bloom, as we could say, the United States was already making changes to try to improve its economy by creating suburbs, by creating the highway system. You know, it already had a lot of oil and petroleum, so transport was very inexpensive at this time. When World War II happened, France shipped a lot of its gold to the United States and for safekeeping, and this allowed the United States to then give out a lot of other loans because they had this capital in their bank and or in their banks or in the federal bank in the Federal Reserve. And feel free to comment if you want to add to this or challenge this. And this was before the United States officially lost its gold backing in 1971 after Nixon. So by receiving this gold from France, this in turn partly helped out the economy. The war put a lot of people to work. It brought women into the workforce. And this is really what got things rolling. Now, in the 1940s, during World War II, jazz was at its blossom. And you might be thinking, why is he talking about jazz again? And there's a very important reason why. Jazz was evolving at a faster pace in the 1940s than it was in the 1930s or the 20s. And it continued to evolve in the 50s and into the 60s. And what did we have during the 50s and the 60s? With Russia? The Cold War. The Cold War. And because of the Cold War and how complicated it was, the United States made significant efforts, very, very huge efforts on international diplomacy. And why is this? Because we needed to win the hearts and the imaginations of everybody else who could be our allies and essentially not be allies with Russia or the Soviet Union at this time. So why did I bring up jazz? Well, I brought up jazz because in the 1960s, the United States made sincere diplomatic efforts with all these other countries by bringing African American jazz musicians to their countries to show them and to showcase them as these very profound musicians and individuals who have progressed and created something that's incredibly beautiful and incredibly complex. And then to also say, look where we started. We had slavery, but now African Americans are completely free, and they're famous jazz musicians. Look at how great and how progressive and how egalitarian the United States is. And for the most part, the rest of the world bought it. The United States did this in the 60s. It is documented. I'm quoting Herbie Hancock in his jazz and cultural diplomacy speech that he gave at Harvard when he was giving the Norton Lectures, I believe in 2015, 2014. You can check that out for yourself. Excellent lectures, great listening practice. So they brought all these African American jazz musicians to these other countries to try to give this image that the United States is completely progressive, fully egalitarian. We have African Americans who once were slaves but now they're free, and of course we have egalitarian with women because they entered the workforce in. During World War II, and now they can vote. So this is the image that the United States painted for all these other countries, and for the most part, all these other countries bought it. They loved jazz to begin with, but they bought it. All the politicians bought it, and this is where I think that they just embraced all of the media that the United States had to offer, because if the United States can produce these great jazz musicians, despite the fact that they were once slaves in their not too distant past, that they must be such a wonderful and great country that all of their message is worthy of taking and feeding on. Now, if you've watched my other videos, you know that I don't believe that there is equality between African Americans and the rest of the United States society, because, well, there isn't. There is institutionalized segregation, institutionalized racism, and all these things within the United States. It's inevitable. It doesn't make the United States an incredibly evil country. It's just something that needs to be recognized before it can be fixed. And there also isn't full equality between men and women in the United States either. So, I say jazz, and I bring up the subject of jazz mainly because it is one thing that can grab the hearts and minds of many, especially with the way it was used in the 1960s. Now, moving forward with how these countries have used or have embraced the United States media, the people who've seen our media or have been exposed to our media get a certain image and a certain idea of what the United States is. We have these very large and nice homes with granite countertops, very large vehicles, more than one vehicle, and we're able to buy a lot of things. And we see this on television, we see this in the movies, we see it in the television series. But is this really the case? No, it's not the case for the majority, but for the top 2%, yes, it is. It would be the case. For the top 2% of the United States, they have very wonderful lives. When we get down to the bottom of the 10%, when we get down to the bottom of the top 10%, the quality of living drops significantly. And then when we get down to, say, like the top 40%, the bottom of that top 40%, the standard of living is pretty average. And then when you figure in the fact that we don't have socialized medicine or socialized healthcare or social security like other people get it in other developed countries, you start to see, well, the quality of life isn't as high in the United States as the media likes to portray it. But why does the media portray this? Why do people buy into it? Why does the media portray it? Well, this has a lot to do with consumerism, right? If we can control the way people spend their money, we can become rich. Meaning, if we can own certain resources that they have to buy, we can run a monopoly on it, and then people must buy these things, we'll become rich. If we tell people they ought to buy certain products, and we keep on showing these products to them again and again and again and again, and even if they're not healthy or not particularly valuable, they'll still buy them. Why? Because we believe what we see repeatedly. If we are told a lie several times, we might start to believe it. We have a higher tendency to believe it. Just like if we lie to ourselves, we have a higher tendency to believe our own lies. So this is just something that I think you probably realize in all media, in all politics, in all environments. It's not just true in the United States, it's true in every country. And I think Donald Trump even said something like that in The Art of the Deal, this book that he wrote, The Art of the Deal, and he said, play to people's desires and fantasies and tell them a lie 3 times, and then you can tell them anything, and then you can close the deal. I believe this is incredibly unethical. I believe it's very selfish, and I think that this type of behavior is the demise to capitalism. I have a very hard time imagining a situation where you could argue that this is ethically appropriate. So I think that this is the mentality with the media, and I think that the media has been incredibly vicious and advantageous towards spreading these ideals, and it works to the benefit of few. It doesn't work to the benefit of the United States. In the United States, we have a much different mentality than the way the rest of the world sees it, and our mentality is basically work, work, work. Don't leave your job for a vacation. The rest of the world is a dangerous place, and hopefully someday I can retire. That's more or less the mentality, and it varies. Remember, we have 322 million people roughly in the United States. It's a very large country. It's very diverse within itself. it's a complicated thing. But after what I've said, I want you to think, how can I see the United States not being the best country in the world? Aside from my other videos, think about that, and feel free to ask me questions. I personally do not feel that United States is the best country in the world. I think it's a comical thing to say that the United States is the best country, but I think it's important to avoid these beliefs. Whether we are from the United States or not from the United States. And I think it's more important to not look at any country as the best country. I think it's important to always look at the benefits and the non-benefits of every country, of every situation. Right, this goes back to holding those two opposing ideas in our mind at once, and that will exercise our intelligence. It will exercise our critical thinking capabilities. And as we exercise our critical thinking capabilities, that will increase our capacity for understanding language, for using language, and in turn becoming better English speakers. If we could think critically in a second language, this is what we would call the apex of that language. So I hope you take this to heart. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask. And remember, I do not think the United States is the best country in the world. It's just another country. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. Please subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.